Picture this, a quiet, everyday public playground suddenly cleared of children. The local community is totally shocked. And almost overnight, a massive global rumor starts spreading like wildfire that Japan is about to deport all of its Muslim residents. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unraveling a really suspenseful national mystery. We're going to look at what actually happens when a country's desperate economic need for survival collides head-on with an ancient, highly structured culture.
To really understand the tension happening right now, we have to start with a recent viral incident that basically set the internet on fire. So, imagine a public playground down in Fukuoka. It's a space specifically designed for kids to play safely, right? Well, suddenly, according to local reports, a group of adults enters the park and actively chases the children away. And why? Because they stated they needed to clear the space to perform their daily Islamic prayers. Now keep in mind, this wasn't a private venue, it was a public community park. The local Japanese residents were just utterly stunned. And the reaction was immediate and incredibly visceral. Many residents started expressing this deep underlying fear that, if quiet public spaces are being taken over today, their private ways of life could be next.
And this single event? It acted like a match in a powder keg. It triggered a massive, panic-inducing rumor across social media platforms all over the globe. The rumor was that Japan's newly elected, highly conservative Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, had just decided to deport all Muslims from the country. Suddenly, you have screaming headlines, people are panicking, and the whole world is watching. But we have to ask the big question. Is Japan really deporting all Muslims? Let's peel back the layers of this social media frenzy and look at the actual facts on the ground.
So, the social media hysteria screams of mass deportation based entirely on religion. But the actual government mandate? It's an entirely different story. The official policy is actually a neutral, hardline approach focused on strict integration and rule enforcement for absolutely all foreigners, regardless of their background or faith. It's essentially an approach focused entirely on ensuring that anyone, literally anyone, who comes to Japan respects local laws and public spaces.
The leader behind this mandate, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, well, she isn't targeting Islam specifically at all. As a conservative and nationalist leader, her primary platform is just the aggressive protection of Japanese culture. She's demanding that every single foreign worker pays their insurance, follows local laws, and respects Japanese societal norms. Her message is strict, for sure, but it's simple. Failure to integrate into the Japanese way of life risks deportation. So it's a blanket integration rule for all foreign workers. It's not a religious purge.
Section 1. The motive. Japan's demographic crisis.
Now, all of this begs a massive question. If the Japanese government is so intensely protective of its culture, why bring in so many foreign workers to begin with? Well, the reality is Japan is facing a demographic ticking time bomb. With a rapidly aging population, a shrinking workforce, and birth rates that just keep dropping, the country urgently needs foreign technical trainees just to keep society running. And where are they sourcing this vital labor? They're looking to countries like Indonesia, which, by the way, is the world's largest Muslim-majority nation, as well as Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Turkey. So Japan's economic survival currently depends heavily on bringing in labor from completely different cultural backgrounds.
To really grasp the social panic, you have to look at the actual scale of this demographic shift. The non-Muslim Japanese population sits at a massive 99.7%. By 2025 estimates, the Muslim population is just 0.3%. I mean, we are talking about roughly 420,000 people. That is a tiny, tiny fraction of the country overall. So, why is the local reaction so intense?
Well, here is why the local population suddenly feels a massive cultural shift despite that super small overall percentage. Back in 2008, there were only around 50 mosques in all of Japan. Today, that number has surged to over 160. To a highly homogeneous society that really isn't used to sudden visual changes in its local neighborhoods, this rapid increase in religious infrastructure feels incredibly pronounced. And for some locals, it's honestly a bit overwhelming.
Section 2. The Shinto cultural clash.
Okay, to truly understand the friction here, you have to remember that Japan is 98% ethnic Japanese. It is profoundly homogeneous. Societal norms there are deeply, deeply rooted in ancient Shinto and Buddhist traditions. These historical traditions are basically the bedrock of Japanese life. They highly value quietness, extreme discipline, order, cleanliness, and above all, avoiding any disruption to the public peace.
When you place these two worlds side by side, misunderstanding is almost inevitable.
It's like a giant puzzle where the pieces just aren't fitting together. On one side, Japanese norms demand quiet, strict rule following, and practices like cremation. But on the other side, immigrant cultural needs require things like performing 5 daily prayers, which, as we've seen, sometimes necessitates public space usage, different burial requirements instead of cremation, and gathering in larger groups. You can immediately see why these two groups are clashing, right? They are operating on entirely different cultural expectations.
And these differing expectations have sparked some highly visible friction points. We're talking about instances of praying in public parks or on streets, which has actually occasionally blocked traffic. There have been cultural controversies over women wearing hijabs in a society that really focuses on uniformity. We've even seen issues with tourists and foreigners disrespecting local wildlife, like the famous deer in Nara Park. Furthermore, some locals are really alarmed by minority demands for Sharia law accommodations, which of course directly clash with Japan's strict secular legal framework.
Section 3. Rising local social tensions.
This brings us to a truly staggering statistic: 95%. Surveys indicate that around 95% of the Japanese public oppose Muslim immigration specifically. Now, to put that into perspective, general foreign immigration still has about 30% support. Imagine how it feels to have such a highly polarized statistic simmering in a normally quiet, reserved country. This massive disparity shows us that the friction isn't just about foreigners in general. It's a specific anxiety about a culture that locals perceive as radically different and potentially unwilling to assimilate into their strict way of life.
So how is this intense anxiety manifesting on the streets? Well, citizens are deeply fearful of developing European-style no-go zones, where local laws might weaken. We're actually seeing real protests, like thousands of people gathered in Fujisawa against a proposed mosque, citing concerns over noise, parking, and potential crime. We are also seeing a rise in right-wing groups holding up Japanese flags and chanting "Japan first." They're holding peaceful but very firm protests to protect their neighborhoods from what they perceive as chaotic, unmanaged cultural changes.
However, it is absolutely crucial that we impartially look at the immigrant perspective here too. The vast majority of these immigrants live completely peacefully and work incredibly hard. They're super grateful for the economic opportunities Japan provides. They aren't trying to cause trouble. They simply feel they need basic accommodations like designated prayer spaces so they don't have to use parks in the first place. Many of them are deeply distressed by the negative media coverage, the actions of just a few rule breakers, and that intense social media rumor mill that unfairly targets their entire community.
Section 4. Economy versus cultural preservation.
Let's look at this quote, because it perfectly encapsulates the Japanese government's current, very tricky dilemma. Diversity is good, but not without rules. Every country wants to protect its identity. They absolutely need the economic boost that these foreign technical trainees provide. Without them, the Japanese economy is facing a severe decline. But at the same time, they completely refuse to sacrifice their cultural security, their strict discipline, and their ancient identity to get it. They are definitively choosing strict integration over unconditional diversity.
Which brings us to a massive, really difficult question for the modern world. How should nations balance the desperate economic need for immigration with the intense desire for cultural preservation? Japan is trying to answer this right now through strict rules and mandated integration. But is that the right way? It's a very fine line between economic survival and losing a national identity, and the whole world is watching to see how Japan navigates it. Think about how this applies to other nations facing similar demographic cliffs. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder that thought.